The infected blood inquiry is going back into session with emergency hearings today to examine concerns about delays and shortcomings in the government's compensation scheme for the victims.
Yeah, the infected blood scandal is described as the worst treatment disaster in NHS history. And victims who included haemophiliacs and women in childbirth still waiting for compensation 50 years on from the scandal.
Joined now by one of the victims who's still waiting for compensation. Mark Ward was born with severe haemophilia, was infected with HIV and hepatitis C after receiving contaminated blood products as a child. And Mark, just to start with what's happening today, the inquiry chairman, Sir Brian Langstaff, who's done a really good job on this inquiry, I think, obviously very disappointed, even cross, that he's having to get the hearing back into session, and it's all to try and understand why it is taking so long to make these payments. I don't think the government's resisting making them, but it's taking so long. Have you any idea why such a tiny number of people have had payments so far?
I think that Sir Brian's knowledge and how the government acted to the inquiry when it was running, they kept putting barriers in the way. So I think, not putting words in Sir Brian's mouth, but I don't think he trusted them like we don't trust them. And it turns out that where they were saying that they were working at pace, they actually hadn't done anything. Penny Mordaunt actually suggested that wheels should be set in motion when they received Sir Brian's report on compensation. They said they were working on it and then didn't. They needed to see the final report before they could do anything. And then the day after Sir Brian reported, hey presto, they had the full response from an expert group that are mysterious, anonymous, we know nothing about, we had no communication with. They clearly could not have read the report. So the tariffs and all of the response, it doesn't bear any resemblance. So the game playing and the contempt has carried on. We then got a new Labour government. And sadly, what they've done is picked up the baton where the Tories left off and carried on. I mean, for instance, we had a meeting with the Paymaster General. It was supposed to be 5 people. 2 people didn't turn up, so fine. You'd think, great. I was given 4 minutes to speak. That was it. And because I dared to speak back, the civil servant next to him, I mean, he had steam coming out of his ears because I'd actually spoken back to him. And he said, we told you only 4 minutes. So a lifetime of pain and grief, and I was given 4 minutes.
Talk to us this morning about that lifetime of pain and grief. You had haemophilia as a child, you were diagnosed. That, as far as I am aware, is when you bleed, you don't clot. So you're at risk of bleeding out every time something happens to you. Your parents didn't want you to have this blood product, did they? They had an instinct that there was going to be, down the line, something wrong with it. I think the product was called Factor 8.
Yes.
But the doctors gave it to you anyway. Tell us what happened and what that then triggered in your life.
So my dad was a working class man, and he never trusted the Americans. And when they kept saying about this new wonder drug from America, he said, no, I want my boy to stay on the British cryoprecipitate, the safe treatment that he saw it, British. And so in the middle of the night, I went down with a nosebleed. They gave me treatment because I didn't see it. And then a couple of days later, I was back at the hospital. They were making my treatment up. My mum looked and said, what's that? And she said, Mark's treatment. Mum said, no, he's on cryo. So she said, oh, no, he's been changed now, he's on Factor 8. So they did it in the middle of the night without permission.
How old were you?
That was 1977, so I was 8. And the nurse just said, oh, well, no point in putting him back now. It's going to change your life forever, which it did. But the fact was that at that point, everything they said about changing our lives, it did, because all of a sudden, because we had the treatment in the fridge at home, it meant that I didn't lose much time at school, because if I had a bleed, Mum would do the injection. And so, you know, we actually got a bit of a life. We went on holiday for the first time, you know, we flew to Jersey. So there was hope, there was a future.
The trouble is, the Factor 8 was blood that had been given from American drug users,
Prisoners.
people infected with HIV, with hepatitis.
Yeah.
It wasn't screened,
No.
and therefore it's being taken straight from them and put into an 8-year-old child
Yep.
here. You thought your life was better. What happened then?
Yeah. So because of the internal bleeding, with haemophilia, you've got, if you cut yourself, it just doesn't stop bleeding. It doesn't squirt everywhere. But the damage is the internal bleeding. So it destroys your joints. So it's degenerative, but it's crippling. I mean, I'm sitting here now looking fantastic, I think, but...
I can agree. I think we all do.
Thank you. Inside, I'm about 90 years old or more. All my joints are being fused and operations. So I had surgery in 1984, 6 weeks in hospital, and as my dad was wheeling me out of the haemophilia unit to the car, a nurse popped up from behind a hatch and shouted across the waiting room, Mr and Mrs Ward, do you want to know Mark's HIV result? And Mum and Dad looked at each other and like, yeah. So she said, oh, positive, see you next time. And then
That was how you found out?
Yeah, yeah. And then a couple of days later, we had to go back.
You at that time were a teenager.
14, yeah.
14. Did you know in 1984, age 14, even what that meant?
No, no.
Being told you're HIV positive?
Yeah, it was just, OK, right. But when we went back...
A few years later, we would have all known what that meant. But in 1984, no.
No. So the consultant, when we went back, said, life changes from here. It's a need-to-know basis. Nobody needs to know because we can't guarantee your safety. My mum then had to get permission for me to carry on attending school from the headmaster every week because if somebody complained, I would be kicked out of school. And then from there on, every time I went to the hospital, they kept reminding me of how I was going to die. I was told if I was lucky, I may have 2 to 3 years to live. Basically, you know, it's get on with things.
Can I ask you about the compensation, Mark? The government has said they've set aside £11 billion. They say that for somebody who was infected with HIV, the expected compensation, £2.2 to £2.6 million for all that loss of earnings and life disruption. But that goes down to, you know, if you were the partner of somebody who's still alive today, you get a much smaller sum, £110,000. They've given 4,000 surviving victims and bereaved payments, small interim payments. But so far, only 475 people have actually had been asked to put a claim in. You, I think, have not even been asked yet, is that right?
No, not yet. Not been invited.
Why? I mean, it's kind of like, it's so obvious. Why wouldn't they just say, get it done?
I can understand the logistics because the IBCA have said they want to have 500 claims managers. You can't just suddenly magic up 500 people in a building, all fully trained up, because it's so complex. You've got the logistics of that. And, I mean, I've actually gone up to IBCA and helped with the training of the claims managers. So they've actually met somebody rather than it all being, you know, a textbook. But from the number of people that it seems are accepting or the delay in actually paying out, I really don't know why. And this feeling that we've always had is that all of the governments have just literally waited for people to die. I mean, for instance, my mum was 80 at the end of last year. They're talking about possibly her maybe receiving compensation by 2029. I mean, you know, we've got the widows of haemophiliacs who died back in the 80s and the 90s, who now are dying of old age. We've got a lady who's got bowel cancer, and it looks like she might not live long enough to see the compensation that she fought for.
Didn't they say they would pay compensation to, you know, the estate, the family of an infected person who's died?
Yes, so the estates go to the wives, the partners, but people like the affected, like my mum, her claim would die with her.
Right.
So,
and of course, it's no benefit to her after all she's been through.
No.
For this to happen years later.
Can I just ask, finally, Mark, about your dad?
Yeah.
Because he was the one who held out for you, didn't he, at the beginning?
Yeah.
His instinct that the British product would have been screened properly and be safe, and there would be something dodgy about the American product. How did he sort of feel when his worst fears were realised?
He went to his grave riddled with guilt because he couldn't protect his boy. And he always said to me, I should have put it in writing, I should have put it in writing. So if you put it in writing, it wouldn't have changed anything because they did it covertly and they were going to do what they wanted to do. I mean, they even wanted to send me to Trelaw's school where, you know, nearly all the boys there became HIV positive and they literally were being used as lab rats. The experimentation that was going on in Trelaw's was right across the whole country with us. We were deemed to be cheaper than chimpanzees. And, you know, when you get taken into hospital and they spike the treatment with HIV to see then how your family become infected, that's how dark we're talking here. I mean, we're talking, you know, it's very, very dark. And how you wrap your head around going forward in life when you've been deemed by the state to be cheaper than a chimpanzee, and then they've tried to cover it up for, you know, half a century.
It's chilling, Mark. I'm glad that you've had more than 4 minutes to explain to us and our viewers the impact that this scandal has had and continues to have. And I know that you're fighting not just for compensation, which you are clearly due, but also for all of those who haven't survived to be able to sit here.
Yeah, the little boys that I hold in my heart, their voices were stolen. So whilst I've got a voice, I use it for them. And I'm not driven by money. And it's funny, and that's the reason why I wrote my book, was that during the pandemic...
Bleeding Fabulous.
Bleeding Fabulous, yes. During the pandemic, facing the threat of yet another virus that could kill me, I didn't go out of the house for 2 years except to be vaccinated, which in itself was a big feat. And I wanted to tell my story in my words, the human side, because life goes on.
Mark, thank you so much.
Will you speak at the inquiry today?
No, I'm there to support.
Right.
Thank you
Others
so
will
much.
be speaking today. That's so important. Government spokesman said, we remain fully committed to cooperating with the inquiry, are acting on its recommendations, are grateful for its work to date. We've paid nearly £80 million in compensation so far and have set aside £11.8 billion to deliver what is one of the most comprehensive compensation schemes in modern history. But I've got to say, as we've just been hearing, they
taking its time.
Get on with it. Get on with it.